Blast Radius is a space combat simulator game that was developed by Psygnosis for the PlayStation in 1998 and was released in North America in early 1999, with the game featuring a single player mode where players control a survivor of a squadron who is tasked with saving the planet from an evil alien invasion. So pretty much you are humanity's last hope for survival. The game consists of 40 missions with 37 different enemy aircraft, including bounty hunters and military ships, and you have a selection from 9 different spacecraft of your own, each with their own unique weaponry and control system in place. Players will engage in various missions across the story that involve destroying enemy machinery and even protecting allied aircraft. And the game also does include a multiplayer feature or a deathmatch mode so that you can play and compete against your mates. The game did receive fairly decent yet mixed reviews upon its launch, stating that it was praised for the gameplay but criticised for its execution. But it was in heavy competition because Psygnosis had also seen a lot of success with the Colony War series around this time. Although this game looks very similar in terms of its graphical style, in many ways it probably feels more like a spin-off or a spiritual successor to Colony Wars in many respects. So that's probably where the level of reviews came from. Now, it's not to say that it's bad, it's actually a very solid game. It has some really nice graphics, really good use of animation, and if you enjoy this futuristic space aesthetic, you literally will have a blast with this. It is a lot of fun, to be fair, it is. And if you like Colony Wars, yeah, this is just more of the same. And this demo gives you a brief synopsis of that, where you can play through one of the levels that would feature in the main game, where the main goal is literally to defeat all of the enemy aircraft within the vicinity. So you'll have access to different types of weapons, from phasers, light guns, to like projecting homing missiles, even like rail cannons that you'll use in order to defeat your opponents. Now, it is tricky, but with a bit of finesse and a bit of understanding of the controls, you'll be quickly able to understand what to do, and it is a lot of fun. I would recommend you give it a try. It's not a bad game, in fairness, it really isn't. The first of the roll-in video demos here on this disc would yet be the same version of the Enlightenment promotional ad that would have appeared in the previous issue, highlighting all of the accessories that were available on the console. There's not really much difference in terms of how it looks, it's exactly the same, but again, this would have appeared on a few of the demos because at the time Sony, especially even in Japan, were heavily promoting certain aspects of the PlayStation, especially the peripherals, because they were a useful aspect or an addition to have the best gaming experience. Whether that be with the link cables, if you're playing multiplayer you'd need 2 consoles and 2 TVs, and then you'd use the special cable to link them together, or even having access to multiple memory cards or even the multi-tap feature to play all the multiplayer games. So there was a lot there that you could use, and when you look back at it, the PlayStation definitely had a very interesting lineup of peripherals, even third-party add-ons as well. So yeah, there was a lot to have for the console, and there was something there for each of the experiences because there was a lot of games that could use them, which was even more interesting.
你要記憶力嘅價值。你一定要同我環境結合。 你一定要控制你嘅命運。一定要直個狀態。你學得真係快啊，仔！你越可以同我一齊，你真係我啲乜嘢都一齊都冇問，你都可以揾到最靈經嘅嘢啦。
The next rolling demo would be yet again another promotional aspect for the next Yaroze development platform, and this would continue to be a theme across 1997 and 1998 on the PlayStation, and more predominantly with the demo CDs themselves, because the demos here were pretty much the main promotional material used to showcase these games that had been developed from up and coming creators. And there was some interesting games, don't get me wrong. There was some games obviously that, yeah, you think they could have been better, but when you think of what was created, especially in the time frames that they were made, it was quite impressive even back then. But still, it was a really cool way just to develop games for the console. The next Yaroze game that would appear on this disc would be a top-down futuristic racing game under the name of Hovercar Racing that acts as kind of like a 2D kind of style experience, while in some of the stages does have some 3D elements visually present, mainly with the likes of the backgrounds that are off in the distance. But realistically what this is just a typical racing game where you start at the beginning or the start line, and your goal is literally just like in a time trial kind of situation, race around the tracks while trying to beat your best lap times. Now there are multiple different courses that are available, and they all have their own caveats and tricks and kind of like quirks to deal with. But the one thing that's apparent with this game is it's very, very fast paced. It's extremely fast, but it's also ridiculously difficult because the controls are overly sensitive to a point that it's almost overbearing. You'll find yourself literally doing 360 spins on the spot, nearly going around corners, just trying to make it round in one piece. And then each track does progressively become more difficult later on, to a point that it can be almost impossible to try and beat your lap times, if at all possible. It's a good idea, but it's tricky. It's probably not the most well executed of these type of games, but it's interesting to say the least. The next rolling demo on this disc would be somewhat of a trailer or a preview to the Spice World game featuring the Spice Girls that was released on the console also around this time. That would project itself giving you access to a load of different like mini games and kind of like almost like a rhythm based kind of aesthetic, especially with the music where you have to time your button combinations and the like, and it has all these kind of like cutesy kind of graphics and visuals of cartoony versions of the characters themselves, but would also give access to some behind the scenes elements of their tours that they got involved with, but even their backgrounds and how they became to be as successful as they were during the 90s. So this essentially gave you an early preview of that. Treasures of the Deep would be a first-person action-adventure game that released for the PlayStation in 1997, being developed by Black Ops Entertainment and published by Namco, that would see players explore underwater environments, with the main objectives based around exploration. We have to navigate different underwater locations, with various mission tasks to be completed, anything from exploring shipwrecks to recovering artifacts, treasure, while also trying to put a stop and even take out other rival kind of like treasure hunters and so forth, and causing havoc. You also have to engage with hostile pirates or entities and sea creatures using high-tech submarine style weapons and equipment, and as you play you'll gather various upgrades, even having access to different high-tech crafts with different types of tools, from spear guns, torpedoes, nets that you can use to trap sea creatures, fish and even other enemies, while also trying to collect treasure along the way that you can use for points or even money that you can use to upgrade all of your elements. When the game did release, it was met with very positive reviews, mainly for its engaging gameplay and atmospheric design, and critics praised the balance of the action and exploration and highlighting the immersive underwater experience, because even playing this demo, which gives you access to one level within the game, you can't help but deny the visual aesthetics that are on display. This is a beautiful looking game. Like, even the water features as well is very realistic for its time, but visually it's stunning. You'd often have to regard it as one of the best and most visually impressive games that you could really see on the PlayStation for its time, especially for 1997. This was a marvel in what it was able to do. It really was, because even when you're maneuvering around the environments, even though everything's underwater, but you can see like all like the seabed with all the plants and kind of like all of the creatures, but then you can see like turtles and different types of fish floating around, sharks even. There's so many different unique types of sea creatures available that the level of detail on each model that's there is truly exceptional. It really is. It is a stunning looking game without question, and this demo really does bring that to the eyes of the player in all its glory. It's an interesting one. It's tough. It's a challenging game, especially in the beginning, because it would take a few tries, I found, even with this demo, to kind of really understand what you're doing. Because what's even realistic about it is that even when you do get into altercations with enemies, because you'll be firing torpedoes and weapons at them, and they can also do the same with you, but the more damage that you take, because of your craft that you're in, they can take damage, and you can see it visibly on the screen with cracks, like on a windscreen of a car, you could say. But if you destroy that, obviously then it'll fill with water and then you'll just drown. So that will essentially be game over and you'll have to start again. So it does have some realistic elements to it in that respect. But just for the visual detail alone, I would recommend you give it a try, because this thing really does look truly exceptional. Definitely worth a go. The next playable demo we have here would come in the form of a racing game, which arguably is one of the most underrated hidden gems, I think, on the PlayStation. While it wasn't seen as having great reviews or mixed average at the time, but this game was essentially ahead of its time in terms of what it offered, because very few games offered so many different gameplay styles and modes all in the one package. And that is with Total Drivin, which would go under a few other names in different regions, but give you access to everything from likes of buggy, off-road style racing to rally racing to even likes of Formula 1 or IndyCar racing, even exotic supercar style racing. There was so many different attributes here that it really was beyond anything else seen on the PlayStation. If anything, even when we look back, for the multitude of racing games that was on the console, very few games matched Total Drivin in terms of its overall quality of what modes were available. Right now, it's not the most most refined racing game in terms of its overall controls and certain dynamic, but it is a very good solid racer. Yes, it has its quirks, it has its flaws like everything else, but if you can walk past that, you'll actually have one of the most diverse of experiences that you could have in a racing game on the PlayStation, because like I said, there's so much there to offer. This particular demo here gives you access to one track within the rally stage, being in Scotland, and you'll race across different types of terrain, from gravel to like tarmac and so forth, anything from like mountainscapes, racing alongside the edges of lakes, to mountains, and even going into forests, where you'll have to deal with all sorts of like hurdles like bumps and dips and other obstacles that will somewhat get in your way. So this demo does give a really good presentation as to what you would get if you were to play the full game. And trust me, if you've played the full game, and I remember going back to playing this years ago, I remember a mate of mine had gotten it when it just came out, and it was very, very cool, but it was very difficult. This is one of the most difficult racing games you could possibly play on the PlayStation. It is very, very challenging, because on each track there is different variations that open up at later stages, but they just become more challenging as each example unlocks that, yeah, it will test your patience. That's all I'll say. But for me, this is definitely one of the PlayStation's hidden gems, or underrated gems, in terms of racing game, and it really does deserve a lot more attention than it actually gets. Even after playing the Total Drivin demo and it using the rally kind of section in it, I was all but excited to play the next racing game that would appear in this next playable demo, with Tommi Mäkinen Rally. As to be honest, the main reason why I bought this particular demo at the time was, in the previous issue you had, for me, one of the best demo discs that had released this far on the UK PlayStation magazine series or format, because you also had the first introduction to the iconic and legendary Colin McRae Rally series, which, apart from its sequel, is the best rally game on the PlayStation, without question. So when I looked at the magazine of the previous issue at that time, and I seen that there was going to be another rally game that was added to the next month's demo disc with Tommi Mäkinen, I thought to myself, you know what, yeah, more of the same, I'm all for it. And I was excited, but when I got to play it, let's just put it this way, it was one of those rare kind of instances where I really was left totally deflated and disappointed. Now looking back, once I've managed to master the game, it's still not great in terms of quality, as essentially this is a port of a rally game that appeared on the PC, more or less, but just with the Tommi Mäkinen kind of like endorsements added to it. But I was expecting it to be more like Colin McRae, but instead it has more arcade aesthetics similar to that of V-Rally, but it's not as good as V-Rally, especially in V-Rally 1. V-Rally 1, even though it's tricky and it's a tough game to master, but it's very, very cool. For me, it's one of the best arcade rally games on the PlayStation. PlayStation. Once you master it, this here falls way short of that. Now I'm not going to sit here and completely slate it. Me being the sucker that I am would sit and play it and try to get to grips with it. And even in later years, for some reason I still go back and play this every so often, because I have managed over time with a bit of practice to understand the controls. It takes a bit of a while, I'll admit, but when you do master it, it's not as bad as what you might think. Yes, it's definitely not great, but you can get to grips with it if you have patience. The one thing that I will admit that drove me mad was the collision detection, because unlike Colin McRae where it had realistic physics, like when you spun the car out, and you could topple the car, but it would take a lot to do it. This thing here, as soon as you even hit a stone on the road or you clipped into another car, the car would instantly turn on its side or on a drift. Like, there was no variant in terms of the overall collision physics in this game. It was just horrible. And because the AI was so aggressive, you made one mistake at all. Sometimes even if you didn't make a mistake, they'd be just gone and way past you. The race would be over before you even knew what was going on. Even though this demo did give you access to utilise some of the playable cars, anything from the likes of the Mitsubishi Lancer to the likes of the Renault Megane and a couple of others, but it still didn't make a difference. It was just a very, very challenging experience. But like I said, I was left disappointed because I was expecting more along the lines of Colin McRae, and then when I got to play this, yeah, it just didn't hit the same way. But me being me, I'll be honest, I just was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. I don't hate it, but it's not my favourite rally game. That's all I'm going to say, really. But like I said, for some reason I still find myself going back to these games. I suppose the way I see it is, even though these games are not considered great, but there is certain quirks to them that I do like, and there is quirks to this that I do like. The fact that it has probably the largest selection of tracks to race on out of any rally game released on the PlayStation. It has even more than Colin McRae, which is quite mad. So there is a lot of longevity here, but in order to master the game, that's where it becomes really, really tricky, because this game is seriously difficult. It does have other aspects to it, like if you played it with your mates, you might get more of an experience out of it, because if you're struggling with the game, the chances are your mates will be struggling with it also, and that would probably be your best chance to win races, to be fair. But if you're playing it on your own, that's where it becomes really annoying and just, yeah, frustrating, to say the least. I suppose it's like anything else, you get out of it what you're willing to put in. Not the best example of a rally game on the PlayStation, but obviously it was popular enough for people to buy it, and for many that didn't get to play Colin McRae or they couldn't afford it at the time, this would have been the alternative for a lot of people. So it will be interesting to hear what you think of it overall. Funnily enough, even when I look back at, you could say, the disappointment of Tommi Mäkinen Rally, which I was hoping for more of back in the day, the one thing I have to remember is that this demo disc actually really had a lot to offer. There was some really cool games and quirky experiences here. Now, when you look at some games, right, would not have been considered all that great, but when you look at the plethora of different experiences that were available, from space shooters to racing, even with strategy, and some really cool hidden gems that were upcoming that would go on to be cult classics on the console, which we will cover soon here. But one of those examples that we're looking at even here will come in the form of a strategy game under the name of Theme Hospital by Bullfrog, who were known for doing other games in a similar type with like Theme Park and a few others. And you know what, this game here ended up really being somewhat of a hidden gem on this disc, but even in general, this game was seriously addictive. Yes, it was clunky and fiddly to get used to the controls, with the emphasis being on to building a hospital where you have to heal and cure patients in order to increase your score more and increase your revenue, because essentially not only are you running a hospital, you're building a business as well. And this demo was quite lengthy because you could play this for quite a while, where you had one hospital to try and deal with, and you had to work within like the first year, which essentially would have had a time frame of like say a couple of minutes. You could say about 15 minutes in total, as that was kind of like the run time for it. But there was a lot to do. Like you could build rooms, like build staff rooms, toilets. You could build like doctor surgeries, diagnosis rooms. You could set up like waiting areas for patients, have reception areas, but then you could also hire staff, and they all would vary in terms of their overall abilities, qualities, their sense of communication, behaviour, how they dealt with the public, how they dealt with people. Some of them had really good attributes where they were very, very good at solving puzzles or solving kind of like diagnosis or people's ailments, but then you had others that were as daft as a brush, pretty much, or that were just blatantly ignorant and just wouldn't help anybody. So you had different personality types that all conflicted with how the place was run, so you had to make those choices as to whether you wanted to hire them or not. But the thing is, you also had to be mindful of is that you did have budgets to work with in terms of marketing and what you could bring in and what equipment and stuff that you get, because you'd have to build rooms in the hospital, you'd have to fill the rooms with the right equipment, either with desks, chairs, cabinets that would house like medicine so that you could cure patients and so forth. Yeah, there just was a lot going on here. Very interesting. Not something that I would ever really have considered myself playing at the time, but it ended up being one of the most addictive experiences that ended up being on the disc, in fairness, because even when I look back, because of this particular demo alone, some of my brothers and even close friends that live nearby ended up going out and buying this game based off of what they experienced in this demo, because they were so addicted to it, even to a point that this particular game, they put serious amount of time into it. I remember even coming home from school sometimes, not even being able to get on the PlayStation because the lads would be actually up playing this before I got home, and you wouldn't get on it for the rest of the day. Always trying to improve on their stats, trying to make sure that they were running the best type of hospital, earning the most amount of money, but then even getting like references or even offers of other jobs to go to even bigger and better hospitals, earning even more money. So you were always kind of playing that kind of, it's almost like a management sim, you could say, in a way. So, and especially with the likes of my brothers, because they were mad into playing like strategy games, they were obsessed with playing games the likes of XCOM Enemy Unknown, and then there was even football management sims. Premier Manager 98 really springs to mind, because that was one game that, yeah, they played a lot too. So anything that had those kind of elements where we could build something and just maintain it, they seemed to be all over it. And this here kind of fitted into that narrative as well, because they were equally as addicted to this as they were to any of those other games. So I can see the idea behind it. It is a very addictive experience and quite a unique one. And if anything, for this, it was kind of a surprise, because for me, even at that, I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. But if you're a fan of these games, yeah, I would definitely give this one a go. There's a lot of funny aspects to it, and it is very enjoyable.
spread diseases. A VIP has entered the building.
Ghost in the Shell would be the next playable demo on this disc, and when you look at the amount of content that was on here so far, and there was some really cool games here, don't get me wrong, and a couple of ones that you could say weren't as good, but I have to say, out of all the games that did appear here, Ghost in the Shell was definitely the biggest surprise out of them all, and if anything, it is the best game on this demo disc on a whole. It's very cool. It's just really quirky, based on like a very popular kind of like anime like book or series, but also has anime kind of like animations playing in the intro leading up to the events that you would see in the game. Essentially, you could say this would be the start sequence of the main game, which would give you access to one level from the main campaign itself, where you're kind of like in an outside industrial complex or warehouse complex, and your goal is to defeat a set number of targets in order to acquire a key to get inside one of the big main warehouses. And then once you're inside, you have to destroy a big machine contraption or boss type character. So you'll end up having to use all of your weapons at your disposal, from your likes of your machine guns that you have attached to the front of your vehicle, but also utilising the likes of missiles or homing missiles and other kind of projectiles in order to do more damage. But what's interesting about this is its scope. The levels are vast and almost kind of like in an open world type format, where you can run, jump, you can kind of almost slide or glide along the ground, but you can climb up walls like as if you were Spider-Man, but in a big like tank machine, as you would have to fight enemies on top of towers, even helicopters and any kind of elements in between, where you'd even have ground soldiers and other robots all out trying to kill you. Yeah, this was actually a really cool game, and it's funny because when I look back, this was one of the games that I didn't think that I could get into all that much, because I didn't really understand it in the beginning, but once I started playing it, I was just like, holy crap, this thing is just mental. It was just frantic from the get-go, but it just looks so cool. It has excellent graphics, a great use of kind of like visual storytelling. Even the voice acting in this game is awesome. It really is. Like when you look at other games that were appearing at this time, this was one of the few games that had very good kind of like voice style acting in it, as voiceovers were still an area where it needed a bit of work, you could say, but this was definitely one of the best examples that was appearing at the time. The quality of it was just a lot better compared to a lot of other games that was out there, so much in the way that yes, this game does have a massive cult following, but even just the series in general, but people really love this game. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone that is a fan of the PlayStation that simply does not like this game. I can't find anyone out there that doesn't, because I think it's really cool, and I know a lot of other content creators have covered this in some of their videos and they rave about it, and quite rightly so. This is just a really cool game. I know in the reviews it got, it was well received, although they did say that the campaign was probably a bit short, which was probably the game's weakest point, but you can't take away from the action, the dialogue, the acting, and just the chaotic nature of it. It's just a very cool game, and it's something that you wouldn't think would hit that level of appeal, but it really did. Not just like say in Japan, but even outside of it, because at that time these type of games would never really have been considered to be all that popular, but this was one of those games to really break that mold. It really was. People just loved this, and I can easily see why, because when you think about it, right, it has really good graphics. Now it might not be seen as the best or the most capable in terms of visual graphics on the PlayStation now. In saying that, it is a very good looking game, don't get me wrong, but I think it's how the game plays, the controls. Even though you're using like older clunkier controls, the game still doesn't feel out of place. It still feels snappy and responsive, and everything just works the way that it should. If anything, it feels a lot more like a modern game, which is crazy to think when this released at the time that it did. If anything, it actually felt way ahead of its time. That'll tell you how truly good this game is. But the way I see it is, you have to play this for yourself to really see what it's like. It is a real hidden gem. If anything, it's one of the best examples of hidden gems that you can find on the PlayStation. That even though it is well liked and was well received, there's still a lot of people out there that simply don't know about it, and it really does deserve a lot more attention. And for those reasons alone, if you haven't played it on this demo, you just need to go and access the full game. I think for me, it's one of the PlayStation's finest examples. Definitely worth a look. So the final demo that we have here on this disc would be yet another racing game, and we really were spoiled for racing experiences here. This one will come in the form of yet another kind of like cutesy top-down racer with circuit breakers, which would follow up from one of the previous issues with a rolling demo that did appear. That would be essentially kind of like a Micro Machines style clone, but would have its own kind of unique elements and cutesy graphics and quirks to it. But would also play in almost like a kart style format. If you've ever played the likes of Mario Kart on Nintendo consoles, you'd have access to loads of different power-ups and features from weapons and so forth to gain advantage against your opponents. But it's a very, very tough and challenging game. Like the final game when it did release ended up having like well over 60 type of tracks all across different locations, anything from likes of snowy mountains that we see here in this demo to the likes of Aztec kind of like pyramid style levels, mountains, forests, cityscapes. There was definitely a lot here that would appeal to players that enjoyed these games, and this demo really helped to give an early preview of what to expect with the full game. But what's also interesting is that on a later edition of one of these magazines there would be another playable demo that would appear, but it would also have a unique concept, and it was a rare thing to actually have on the PlayStation, is that if you actually had access to the demo, but at that point when it did release, if you had access to the full game, if you had managed to buy it at that point, you could use the demo to unlock even more tracks that weren't actually in the full game. Essentially it was more like today's version of DLC, which was quite mad that you could only get access to them that if you had that particular demo disc. What you would do is you'd load up the demo CD, load up the game. While the game was loaded, you'd open up the console, take the CD out and pop in the CD for the actual full Circuit Breakers game. From there it would load up and it would unlock a lot of the other tracks, and you could play from there. That would be in even different locations that weren't in the original game, which was mad, and it was something you'd never see. And when you look back, I think that was a really cool feature to have, and it should have been done a lot more, because when you think about it really, yes, the demos were used more so as a preview to kind of highlight different elements within these games, but I think they would have helped to sell a lot more copies if they had more demos like this that even that came out at later stages, almost like a free DLC if you will. Well, I'd imagine the companies would have made money, because whoever whoever was developing these magazines would have had to pay for that privilege to happen. But between the two of them, some of them would have made money somewhere along the line. But it was just something that you didn't often see. The fact is that you had a load of hidden tracks that weren't available in the full game, but you needed to buy a demo CD in order to access them, which was quite mad. Yeah, but only on the PlayStation. Yeah, it still has the ability to surprise you with its quirky elements even all these years later. No other console that I remember has ever been able to really manage that feat. It still hasn't, even to this day. But the funny thing is, a lot of these secrets are so well hidden that you wouldn't have really known about it until someone stumbled across it. But if you do find it, you're in for a real treat. But as for the game, if you're a fan of the likes of Micro Machines that also appear on the PlayStation, you may as well go and play this, because it is more of the same. It may not be as well polished or as refined, but it's still an interesting game nonetheless. With this particular demo CD, I will have to admit, looking back, while yes, there were a lot of games that I got excited for, but yet at the same time I was left disappointed with one or two, especially with the likes of Tommi Mäkinen Rally. But you can't help but deny the depth of the content that ended up being on it, because you had tons of different racing games, you had some really cool video demos and some really cool hidden gems with the likes of Team Hospital and especially Ghost in the Shell, which for me was the best game and is the best game on this disc. Even Treasures of the Deep was a real hidden gem as well in terms of its overall quality. Like, the level of detail in terms of its visuals are second to none of anything seen on the PlayStation. It's a visual masterpiece that definitely deserves more respect. Actually, all of the games here, even the bad ones, because they would have appealed to some regardless of what people would have thought of. Like, even with the likes of Circuit Breakers here as well, with it being a preview of what was coming in the full game. But even with this particular demo, it does even reach out towards the end. If you watch some of the additional sequences that play out once you finish up, it does give a brief hint of a free add-on that would appear in the magazine alone, that would have given you access to additional tracks and features that wouldn't have been in the full game, which you would have only gotten from that demo alone in a future issue, which I will be covering when that comes up real soon. But yeah, it was just really cool to see it, to have so many quirks and even just to get those snippets of information. But the games here, regardless of what people think of them, they did appeal to some. Now, I'll admit, even looking back for myself, I was heavily disappointed with Tommi Mäkinen Rally, and I know you might be thinking I keep going on about it, but when you look at the quality of Colin McRae Rally that appeared in the issue before this, it did set the standard and it set the stage, and you were hoping that whatever you got to play next could equally match it. Now, unfortunately, not every game could, because Colin McRae really did set the bar and it was on another level. The only rally game that essentially beat it, you could say, was its own sequel, Colin McRae Rally 2. Now, there would be V-Rally 2 that would appear in 1999, which in a lot of ways would come close because it had a lot going for it too. But yeah, Colin McRae really set the standard. The one thing I will admit that Tommi Mäkinen Rally did have going for it, that it had among some of the largest selection of rally tracks that you could have in any rally game on the PlayStation for its time. And it did have some interesting arcade features, but like I said, it just wasn't well executed the way that it could have been. But bear in mind, this was a port of a PC rally game as well. But still, it's interesting. But then you had the likes of Total Drivin, which for me is definitely a rare hidden gem on the PlayStation that really deserves more attention, because there's so many gameplay types with it, with different modes, while you only had access to one of them here. It's just really cool game. And then Team Hospital and Ghost in the Shell, yeah, what more can you say? It was just such a diverse lineup. It was just very cool. And if anything, when I do look back, I obviously didn't give this particular demo CD as much credit as it actually deserved. There was a lot more going on here than I initially thought in the beginning. Regardless of certain games, the games that were here were very cool, and I would recommend that you check them out. There's a lot of diversity here that will definitely appeal to different types of players across the board, and will have great memories tied to them. And with that being said, I would love to know your thoughts of this. What particular games on this CD did you enjoy the most, and which ones did you think were hidden gems, or which ones did you thought at first that you might not have liked them but then you've grown to love them like I did? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content of other demos that I have covered previously from this series on the channel, you can check out this next playlist right here. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.